This video is brought to you by patreon.com/worsttake. Get access to exclusive live streams and Discord servers, on-screen shoutouts, and early access to some videos when you join now. Help make sure that we can continue to make content like this by supporting the Patreon. Links are in the description down below.
You know, we've talked a lot about what the Browns' problems are, where they all sit, and everything else. That, you know, I'm gonna just give us a break this day, or at least for this video, and we're gonna talk about somebody else's problems, not just somebody else's problems, our rivals' problems. And to talk about this, I'm gonna bring in somebody you know very well if you watch AFC North Talk, Jared Bailey. Jared, how are things going in Pittsburgh?
First 3 weeks, I'm on cloud nine. They're 3-0. Life's good. Defense is playing well. Fields looks pretty solid. I mean, the last 2 weeks, it's been, I don't know, a lot of deja vu where, you know, you see the team start off slow offensively, get down. Defense hasn't really looked great the last 2 weeks. So it's a lot of, rewatching these games the last couple of weeks has not been a fun chore of mine.
You know, I've been at a pretty interesting place with the Steelers season, because when it got off to that 2-0 start, I was like, I wasn't caught off guard by that. I think a lot of people were, because I thought that they were a better team, just offset between the two teams that they played. Then they beat the Chargers, and that's when things started to change for me. I'm like, oh, they might actually be good this year, and like their defense, like it might be the best defense in the NFL. Like, I started to give them the credit there, right? I remember saying like, yo, this is Kevin Stefanski's looking at this and saying this should be me right now, right? This is how we should be winning games. And then these last 2 weeks happen, and you have whatever happens with the Joe Flacco magic with the Colts happens in that game. I mean, they were able to move the ball even before Joe Flacco got in there. And then you also have what happens this week versus the Cowboys, which, like, I think I talked to you about. I think I sent this in the group text where I'm like, well, the Cowboys do all of this impressive stuff until they get to the red zone and they look like a toddler about to soil their day. Like, it's in one hand, it's hilarious because like the Cowboys do stuff like that, but on the other hand, it's like, oh man, if Dak doesn't decide to hold the ball for like 45 seconds and get strip sacked, if Dak doesn't throw an interception so bad that it leaves Chris Collinsworth speechless, like what happens to the score of that game and what happens to the outcome of that game? And I just wonder, like, where are Steeler fans at with where this defense is? Because I think we saw 3 weeks of really strong. I mean, Kirk Cousins, that game against Kirk Cousins looks so much more impressive than it did week one because of how Kirk has looked for the rest of this year. But then you also turn around and you look at like how Dallas has looked offensively, how the Colts have looked offensively for the rest of the year, and you're equally as unimpressed as you are impressed with some of the stuff that they did at the early part of the season. So I'm wondering, like, where do you sit here on this barometer with the Steelers defense?
Yeah, so third down has been the biggest thing for me. It was a big issue against the Colts. The Colts were 6 of 10 on 3rd and 5 or longer. And you know, we can talk about, oh, well, they can't, lean on the defense so much week in, week out. Well, when they're the highest paid defensive unit in football, that's kind of what they're paid to do. And the fact that Joe Flacco was able to just carve them up with Josh Downs over the middle a lot. Michael Pittman had a big game that week. They just looked very uncomfortable. But at the same time, like I was like, all right, yeah, it was a bad game, but like I don't, expect this to continue. Dallas doesn't have as many playmakers as Indy does wide receiver wise. Obviously, CD Lamb's a dog, but outside of that, like there's not one that like horrifies you. But again, third down was an issue, and it was a tale of two halves against Dallas because first half they hold them to 6 points. They got a couple splash plays and whatnot. The offense started off slow. Then the second half, Dallas had 2 drives that were 15 plays or longer that both ended in touchdowns, including the last drive of the game. And it was Rico Dowdle just giving them hell. And it wasn't like anything huge. It was just consistent, like 5-6 yard gains that they just could not stop. Hunter Lipke had a big screen pass that set him up inside the 10. And it's just like, bro, you got, and I understand that some guys were hurt. Like Highsmith didn't play, Herbig left the game and everything, but you still got Patrick Queen, who you paid a ton of money to, who's been on a milk carton for the first month of the year. No idea where Patrick Queen is. Um, it just hasn't been good over the past 2 weeks. They were 27th in third down success rate on defense. That ain't gonna cut it, bud. Not gonna cut it. So, and the biggest thing for me is what it has been overall with this team for too long, and it's just Mike Tomlin's outdated, stale approach to winning games, which is all right, we're just going to hold teams below a certain threshold, and that's how we'll win, which is cool, man. You can beat bad teams doing that. You can beat bad offenses doing that. But the not crappy teams, the above average teams, you're not going to win all those. And they had 3 takeaways, a blocked field goal. They didn't turn the ball over, and they still lose. Like, when you're that reliant on your defense and your offense is that poor, you're not going to win those close games. And the past couple of weeks we've seen that play out.
I was thinking of you at the beginning of this game because I think you said in your video, it's like a catchphrase of yours on AFC's North Talk, or it's starting to begin one. I'm not going to lose sleep over an X player. And I think you said that over Kevontae Turpin.
Man, and it was like they were ripped my soul out.
They were like determined to be like, you're going to eat your words, Jared, on this. Like they threw that. But I was like, it was right before because CeeDee Lamb makes an incredible play every week, but like there was this play where he just like decided to pluck a ball out of thin air and just like get both of his feet in, like it was nothing.
Guess what, Quincy? It was on a third down and long.
And I remember before that play thinking, why is Kevontae Turpin getting way more touches than CeeDee Lamb right now? Like, what is going on with Mike McCarthy here? But yeah, it has been an interesting couple of weeks here for that Steelers defense. But I would say most Steelers fans would feel like if you can fix some of these problems on the Steelers defense, or at least you're not as worried about the defense as you are. I don't want to say they're worried about offense, but like you got to be like naturally anxious about the Steelers offense over the last few years. Justin Fields is in right now. It seems like Russ is finally going to be healthy, even though he's worn a uniform. I think he's been an emergency quarterback all season. It's just a weird. It's just Russ being weird, man. Like I see Russ out there in the full uniform, and I remember like that report last year that Russ was doing up downs on the planes in like full gear.
God. Yeah, that sounds about right.
And I'm like, maybe this is just what this dude is.
Yeah, he's been the emergency third guy all season long. So like he's suited up, which I mean, whatever. If you want to suit up or whatever. Kyle Allen had to come in for a play because Fields took a big hit. They tested him for a concussion. He cleared it. Kyle Allen had a 19-yard completion on his one throw to Pat Freiermuth, and everybody in Acrisure was like, "Holy hell!" And then a couple plays later, Fields threw a touchdown to Connor Hayward. The offense, man, like a lot of fans of Pittsburgh, or even like people who might not be Steelers fans, who just kind of look at the scores in the box score and be like, okay, what's so different from this and the Kenny Pickett team? There's a lot different about this and the Kenny Pickett team over the past couple years in terms of how Justin Fields has played. And I mean, you know me, I'm not going to pound the table for Justin Fields all of a sudden being like an elite quarterback, but I think it's fair to say he's like a top 20 guy right now, especially with how he's played. I'm looking for the metrics right now. So
he's definitely playing at like a starting quality, right?
Yeah, like he's
it's
not a bum.
Yeah, you're not saying like he's franchise right now, but you're like, you know what? If you had to give him this basic starting money, which is like a little bit less than what Baker got. Baker got what? 25?
He got 3 for 100, so like 33.
Yeah, 33. Like if you gave him like 50 over 2, you wouldn't be too upset at it. Yeah.
No, absolutely not. And for the crowd that's like, oh, how is this different from Kenny Pickett? Well, Justin Fields right now through the first 5 games, 8 total touchdowns, 15th in EPA, 15th in success rate, 6th in CPOE, 13th in EPA plus CPOE. Kenny Pickett last year through 5 games, 5 total touchdowns, 29th in EPA, 32nd in success rate, 31st in CPOE, 33rd in EPA plus CPOE. So Justin Fields is quite literally at least twice as talented and as playing twice as good as Kenny Pickett was. It's just the fact that he's throwing to Van Jefferson and Connor Hayward, and the run game stinks. We got Dasani Najee back there that's not doing much of anything. And by the way,
most disrespectful.
By the way, this game, Najee Harris, 42 yards on the ground, continues just to be perfectly mediocre. So they can't do anything in the run game. Offensive line's getting a little bit better, though. Like Zach Frazier's playing well as a rookie. Mason McCormick, another rookie, had a really strong game. Isaac Samalo came back. So the interior of the line's getting better. I think Broderick Jones and Dan Moore both played respectable. I don't think they were great, but they were, fine. I think a lot of this is just Najee Harris isn't a very good scheme fit for an outside zone based scheme that Arthur Smith runs. He has zero explosiveness to his game. Kalen Saunders, I think that's his name, got the interception last night for the Saints.
Oh
Legitimately
yeah,
think Najee Harris. I would
definitely got a better 10-yard split. Like
1 trillion%.
definitely.
Absolutely.
It
So,
is. Doesn't that like amaze you whenever you see something like that and you're like, wow, dude, the NFL is so much faster than college? Because like we weren't even thinking, like we were like, yeah, Najee's not the fastest, right? And then you watch him run in the NFL and it's like, did he lose both of his Achilles? Like he
right.
cannot accelerate.
He runs like he's got a parachute attached to his hip. Like he cannot get any sort of acceleration ever. I tweeted this. Every Najee Harris carry is the most chaotic 3 yards I've ever seen in my life. It's
It
just
is. You can
always,
feel gravity getting denser
oh
when
yeah,
Najee Harris runs the football. Like I used to say, Big Ben used to run like a man who's late to work. But like even that looks like it's moving faster than how Najee runs. Like I can't explain how it is. Where it's like the best tweet was like, what he runs like he got jeans on.
that's a good one. I think
Yeah,
he runs like he's like trudging through water. Does that make
you
sense?
know
Like if,
it. It's like he ran in quicksand. Like
yeah,
it
yeah,
just progress. Like the effort gets so much stronger, but the speed just goes
stays the same.
so much slower, and you're like, what is going on here
It's
with
rough.
this acceleration?
And they didn't have Jalen Warren or Cordero Patterson, who, are both. Cordero Patterson was explosive against the Colts when he got hurt. Jalen Warren's obviously really awesome. So they utilized Aaron Champlin and Jonathan Ward. So, I mean, didn't really have much else to turn to in the run game. But the play calling, man, the last 2 weeks hasn't been good from Arthur Smith either. They, on the first drive, they had a second and long, which they ran, got a yard. Then they had a third and long, and ran a shotgun toss play to Aaron Champlin on third and long, basically just waving a white flag, saying, "That's fine, we'll take 3. We're not going to even try to move the chains here." And it's just stuff like that that's so frustrating with how conservative they are offensively. And look, that has spanned multiple coordinators, that has spanned multiple years. So I have a hard time like fully blaming Arthur Smith when this just feels like the way that Mike Tomlin wants to play football. And it's incredibly frustrating to watch every week because I've seen this game a billion times for the past like 5 years. And I know exactly how just about every game is going to go. They're going to start slow offensively. They're not going to score a ton of points, going to rely too much on the defense. Bet the under every Steelers game. You're probably going to make some money. And that's usually how it's going to go.
All right, let's talk about George Pickens. It's that time of the year where we start talking about, George Pickens and all the things that are associated with him. It's funny because the thing I thought would be a big deal was like that like last minute yank that he did on that DB who was definitely doing a bit
Jordan
too
Lewis.
much, right? Like, but I guess people went past that one. I had no idea what the controversy would be this week, which is they are not happy with the effort of George Pickens on some of these routes. And then you watch some of them and you're like, wow. And then you hear what the excuse, like this came from the Steelers, right? I think Carter, shout out to Carter, asked the question, was it a part of his load management? And they said sometimes.
So Chris Carter of the Pittsburgh Post-Gazette, I love Chris. He's great. Yeah, he asked. So Mike Tomlin attributed everything to snap management as to why George Pickens wasn't on the field. And if you want the exact snap counts, Van Jefferson was on the field for, I believe, 47 snaps. Calvin Austin got 44. Pickens got 34. That was a career low.
Wasn't
And
that like similar to with Cam Hayward snap count?
something of that. No, Cam Hayward had more snaps than Pickens did. So, I
That's
mean, that
wild.
tells you all you need to know. And after the game, Tomlin said, "Oh, yeah, snap management," to which everybody was like, "Okay, Mike." And Chris Carter asked in the press conference today if George Pickens' effort attributed to the quote unquote load management, to which Mike Tomlin said yes. So,
Ah,
without coming out and anybody who expected anything less than like a word salad answer from Mike Tomlin, I think you were expecting a little bit too much. He's not going to come out and publicly bash a player. They're going to handle that stuff behind closed doors. But this also isn't anything new. If you go back to after the game last year on Thursday night when they lost to the Patriots, Minka Fitzpatrick was visibly pissed and said that some guys think that they can just come in here and make plays and not have to work for it and anything like that. And we have to check that mentality. Doesn't take a rocket scientist to figure out who he was probably talking about there. And
mm-hmm.
then after this game, Pat Fryermuth said, guys can bitch and moan about targets all they want, but it's about what you do when you don't get the ball. So, like, it's very evident, like, guys are just frustrated with the effort that he's given, when we don't see it, whether it be in practice or what's going on behind the scenes. I'm not going to pretend I have any sort of like inside info on this, but if you can read the tea leaves, it's pretty evident that the team isn't happy with how he's behaving, and it's starting to leak out onto the field because he's showing half-assed effort where he's kind of jogging through routes. If he knows he's not getting the ball, he's just kind of sleepwalking through it, and it's pretty evident that the team's not happy. I don't know what's going to happen next. Maybe he has 7 catches for a buck 50 and 2 scores against the Raiders. That would be pretty great, but I think that there's a greater than zero chance that if the Steelers do acquire like, a top tier receiver, say they do get Devontae Adams, wouldn't be shocked if they moved Pickens.
You know what George Pickens reminds me of?
Well,
He's like that problematic musician where it's like you get fed up and then they drop a banger. And you're like, oh, okay. Well, you know what? George doesn't have to run all the time, right? Like, he doesn't always have to show up on time, right? It's like Lauryn Hill, where it's like, oh, well, Lauryn Hill doesn't, you still get to see Lauryn Hill, and then, like, she sings the Fuji songs, and you be like, yeah, and it's okay. It's okay, but in the back of your mind, you're like, man, one day this shit gonna get old, right? Like, and it's like every year it keeps happening, and you're like, eventually, this shit gonna get old with people, right? And it's interesting. The people who are saying stuff aren't like the Cam Haywards of the world who's like, hey man, I might retire after this year or next year, right? It's like Pat Fryermuth, who just signed a new contract, who knows I'm gonna have to deal with this shit, right? Like that's saying something about it. And I think that's probably the thing. If you're Mike Tomlin, like, I know he's really good at managing these things where you have to pay attention to that, be like, hey man, like, it can't continue to be like this, because he's going to probably go out there, do the George Pickens thing, get 100+ yards, make a couple incredible catches. Then all his fans are going to be on here dunking on the people who said anything about it next week. But the fact is that he's only been in the league how long? 3 years, and we already have like an annual George Pickens thing. Like he already is known for this, and it's not like he came in with a clean reputation, right? So this is baggage that he carried from Georgia that he's carrying on to the NFL, and I just wonder, like, Pittsburgh clearly got to their point with Antonio Brown, and that might be one of the best wide receivers, like, route running that I've ever seen in my life. Right. So they'll get to that point with you if you're George Pickens. I mean, they got to that point with Martavius Bryant, and Martavius Bryant they called him freak.
Nice.
Right? Like, so, like, they will deal with stuff, but they're not gonna do it to the detriment of the overall maturity of this locker room. And I'm just wondering, like, how much longer do you think this can continue with George until it becomes past that point where you just have to take the L on it?
And I mean, how they did it this past offseason with Deontay Johnson, who, credit to Deontay Johnson. Like, I think a lot of the Steelers fans gave him a little bit of a bad rap, myself included at times, because, he would catch the ball. Like, if it was on a curl or a comeback, he'd catch the ball, run backwards about 3 yards, and then circle back upfield to try to make up the yardage that he lost.
He do all that stuff people hate.
he does a lot of that stuff, yes.
Yeah, it's like there's quarters like that, and there's wide receivers like that, where they do all that stuff that people hate.
Yeah. And like last year, against the Bengals, he had that play where there was a fumble and he didn't dive on the ball. He just kind of like walked the play, and he got a lot of crap for that and whatnot. My point being that Deontay Johnson was the wide receiver 1 of this team, and they traded him for they got Dante Jackson back in return, who's been good, but they traded him for a day 3 pick and a player, and they moved on from him pretty effortlessly. The thing with George is that, like, he's so supremely talented. Everybody knows he's incredibly talented. It's just, dude, you got to grow up. And there was, whispers and everything that, hey, the Steelers might target L'Jarius Sneed in the offseason. Would George Pickens maybe be part of a deal to get L'Jarius Sneed? They held on to George, obviously, and in hopes that he would mature. But, we're here right now where it's still a problem. And eventually I do think that, you got to kind of ask yourself, okay, is this worth it? And if you can get a star receiver before the deadline and you feel like it's, worth moving on from, because this whole offseason was basically about getting all the crap out, right? He got out Kenny Pickett, he threw a fit, for not being able to start against Seattle. He refused to dress to back up Mason Rudolph. Get him out. Trade away Deontay Johnson, who, there might have been something going on in the locker room, might not have been. Get him out. If it's still continuing, then stay true to that. And like Mike Tomlin, like it's so very see through because somebody asked him about the eye black because his eye black said always or open effing always, and Mike Tomlin's like, I did not see his eye black, nor did I see what it said. Did you not look at him all game, Mike? Like, come on, like it's very coach speak and everything, and I get that, but all of this is also very see through. They very clearly were disciplining him and benching him, and you know what, fair enough, and they'll deal with it behind closed doors. But sincerely hope it gets better because you want a guy like that on your team because he's very good, especially when your number 2 wide receiver right now is Van Jefferson or Calvin Austin, and it's just not a very good receiver room. Hopefully it gets figured out. Hopefully they get somebody else in there. But yeah, doing this annual conversation about Steelers receivers does get very old because it doesn't seem like they can draft a receiver that isn't a total head case.
Yeah, I mean, like it makes you miss Juju, right? Like
I don't know about all that. Like I know that Juju just had a big game last night, and everybody who was like talking about bringing him back is like, see, I was like, all right, dude, he's playing with Patrick Mahomes, with Travis Kelce and Xavier Worthy there.
It just reminds you that like the stuff that bugged you about Juju was just kind of silly that he kept doing.
Well, I will. Yeah. You know what? If it is silly, I don't care. Like I'll die on my own hill. Like I don't want the effing TikTok guy on my team anymore. That's fine. He can go away. If he has 100 yards every game for the Chiefs, whatever. Go do it. Have fun. I just don't want to deal with it every week anymore. Maybe that's just me being a little bit, whatever. I don't care.
You sound like a millennial. I don't know if you are.
What year's the cutoff for millennials? I was born in 98.
I'm 90? I think it's 96.
Maybe. Okay, that sounds about right.
Yeah, 96.
I think I just missed it.
You just missed it. Well, you're Zillennial or whatever it is, right? Because like the TikTok stuff, every time I get mad, I'll be feeling real millennial, but I'll be like, these damn TikToks. Okay.
That's the first thing that made me feel old, is because I don't do TikTok. I'm just not good
at
doing that. I was like, all right, this is my cutoff. I'm not going to be a TikTok guy.
No, we've never got like a great star from short form content. Like we got
absolutely not.
We got the Paul brothers. We got like we it's not been a net positive. Like we've gotten from these short form. With King Bach, like yeah, I could do without all these dudes who popped off short form. But I think it's going to be an interesting conversation. Look, if you want to punish George Pickens, you know where to send them. That's all I'm going to say there. But y'all have a great day. Have a better night. Jared, let them know where they can find you, man.
Follow me on Twitter at JBaileyNFL. Subscribe to the YouTube channel under the same name, youtube.com/@JBaileyNFL. And then watch me and Q every week on AFC North Talk. So subscribe to everything. Watch all our content. It's a lot of fun.
All right, man. You have a good one.